Story 1. I spent my last night drunk, being chased with a spotlight through the woods by police. I hid and passed out in an abandoned house. When I woke up the next morning, I started looking for a residential rehabilitation program. I ended up in rehab 4 days later. I am approaching 8 years of sobriety in May. Story 2. One night, I was in bed crying. I had finally hit rock bottom and was waiting for the hardware store to open to buy a rope to end it. I was about to lose my condominium, had lost my job, and could no longer pay my bills. I lived to use and used to live. Then I remembered a friend who managed to stay sober after going to a recovery center. I decided to give that a try, thinking I could always end it later. That was over 14 years ago. I am still clean and sober. Story 3. My sister got pregnant. I refused to be the alcoholic aunt. I did it for the child. Now my life is filled with more joy than I ever imagined. The fog that alcohol created has lifted, and the world is brighter. You don't realize how bad you are feeling until you are out of it. Story 4. My body and organs felt swollen. My heart experienced random bouts of arrhythmia. I was a severe functional alcoholic and could consume a half-liter of vodka without my wife knowing. Many workday mornings, I was in a daze and unable to do anything. A moment of clarity occurred, and I saw my life from a third-person perspective, how truly miserable I was. I spoke to my wife, called my doctor, contacted my mother, talked to friends, and told them all that I needed help. 4.5 years later, I am still sober. Story 5. Hitting rock bottom nearly ruined my marriage. I had my first child and, during COVID, was drunkenly taking him for walks. I tried to stop but couldn't. I was hiding the fact that my attempts to quit, which were the only thing holding my marriage together, were a facade. I got caught. I realized I was using alcohol to escape from trauma, which seems silly looking back on it, but the mind does that. I also realized I had never truly opened up to anyone, especially my wife. I was living a lie. I started opening up to her and told her everything. I never realized how much I needed that, which again seems silly in hindsight. She stood by me and was my rock while I struggled for weeks going through withdrawals. Wishing you all the best on your journey. Story 6. I drank about 12 to 17 beers every single day for a long time. I finally stopped about 3 years ago and haven't tasted any alcohol since. The main thing is that you have to be ready to stop. I also heard about a book called The Easy Way to Control Alcohol by Alan Carr, which helped me a great deal. I felt it was time to stop anyway. Story 7. I woke up one day and was tired of the whole scene. I had never driven under the influence, lost a job, or harmed my wife. I just felt that the routine was no longer fulfilling. I attended a meeting, and that was that over 28 years ago. Story 8. Health. It was never the outcry from friends or family or work. It was and is a personal decision for everyone. Once a drinker gets tired of being sick, they will stop. I've noticed through the years this tends to happen around the age of 40. Story 9. I ended up using crack because drinking was not effective and it made me feel worse. This led me to use crack to forget the consequences of my actions. I've been sober for just over a year, and I am almost 3 months clean. Story 10. I have a coworker who recently sobered up, and I wish I knew him well enough to ask this question. He is in his early to mid-20s and has already faced alcoholism and decided to overcome it. Everyone is so proud of you, Dino. Story 11. I was finally done. I woke up hungover and feeling terrible for the millionth time and made a decision that I wasn't doing this anymore. Whatever I did, live or die, it wasn't going to be this. I talked to my family, and by nightfall, I was checked into detox. 15 years later, I don't miss it at all. Story 12. The doctor said I wouldn't live past 40. Prescribed a temporary craving inhibitor medication, and I quit cold turkey. It may not have been the best way to quit, but 4 years later, I've never touched another drink, so it worked out well for me. Story 13. I am a former alcoholic of 10 years. Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't for me and kept me dependent on alcohol. I now control exactly how much I want to drink, which is none. Story 14. It affected my sleep. I would only get a few hours. Then I would be awake and anxious from 2 a.m. until I drank again. I started drinking in the morning. My emotional regulation became completely disrupted. I was like a tornado and constantly overthought everything. I stumbled into Alcoholics Anonymous, hit two rock bottoms, and then quit on July 4th, 2023. It was the best decision I ever made. Story 15. My cousin is in a difficult situation. He has spent multiple stints in rehabilitation and has been convicted of more than 6 driving under the influence offenses. He currently has no driver's license, his wife has divorced him, and his adult children have a strained relationship with him due to his past actions, including an incident where he choked his daughter while intoxicated, resulting in his arrest and a brief jail sentence. His health has also deteriorated, his liver is damaged, and now even 2 drinks can have a severe impact on him. He has been incarcerated twice, and his siblings harbor resentment towards him, largely due to inheritance disputes after their father's death. Their father had bequeathed him a 170-acre marsh that he had maintained, while he purchased 90% of the remaining marsh from his father about 10 years prior to his passing. While they received property and a house, they wanted all of it. It is ultimately up to him to choose to become sober, as everyone around him has made efforts to support him. The only thing that previously helped him stay sober was an ankle monitor, but he is unwilling to use one again due to financial constraints and insists he would rather remove it. He claims he will not return to jail, but I fear that might be inevitable, and there are concerns he may harm himself in the process. After his last comments about suicide, his psychiatrist remarked that there is nothing more they can do to help him. Story 16. I started getting violent when I was drunk, and finally, after many years of drinking, I accepted that I couldn't control my consumption no matter what I did. I am an alcoholic, and I always will be. It's an allergy. Once you have it, it never goes away. You can't turn a pickle back into a cucumber. Story 17. I blacked out at a work party and went home with a coworker while in a relationship. That was when I realized that I was no longer in control and my alcoholism was affecting not only me but also those around me. Story 18. After 20 years of drinking and using substances, I hit rock bottom just 2 weeks before turning 34. I enjoyed it for many years, but in the last few it became uncontrollable. Each time I drank, the experience became more extreme, and the situations I found myself in grew more severe. After a weekend in New York City to decompress, which actually turned into 3 days of drinking and using from morning until I passed out, I looked at myself in the mirror and made a promise to never drink again. That was a little over 9 years ago. It took a great therapist and Alcoholics Anonymous to help me get sober, and I am glad I did. Life is much better and easier now. Story 19. 8 months sober. There is no such thing as a former alcoholic. I will always be an alcoholic, sober or not. I knew I was ready to stop when I felt my insides deteriorating. I will never forget how the withdrawals felt. I will never go back. Life sober is 10 times better. I can finally enjoy the little things in life and appreciate much more. God is good. Story 20. Some psilocybin experiences were beneficial. My last drink was on Mother's Day almost 2 years ago. I didn't intend for it to happen that way, but my mom passed away due to alcoholism. Story 21. I was never officially diagnosed with alcoholism, but it runs in my family. For much of my 20s, I drank to excess, often blacking out multiple nights a week. Sometime in my late 20s, I developed an allergy to alcohol. If I have even a single can of beer these days, I will within a few hours develop an intense hangover. I am often unable to function by morning. Initially, I was depressed about it and for a few years tried to drink despite the discomfort at least a few times a month. However, by my early 30s, it was clear that alcohol and my body would never be compatible again. Throughout my 30s, I did drink occasionally, maybe a few times a year for special events like weddings. I always paid for it later. Over the last few years, I've completely eliminated alcohol from my life. I consider myself lucky. Story 22. I was spending more money on alcohol than on food. During work trips, I would choose hotels that offered free breakfast and use my daily allowance to buy appetizers and drinks at the bar each night. My relationships were suffering, and I was in worse shape. My social media posts primarily featured the fancy drink of the week. So I quit. I am now 40 months sober. Story 23. I struggled with my ex-wife's addiction to alcohol. We were married for 22 years. She was raped in 2005 and never recovered. She drank constantly, went to rehab 4 times, had 2 driving under the influence charges, and spent 6 months in jail. I finally divorced her in 2015, and she passed away in 2016. You will never find anything at the bottom of a bottle except misery. Story 24. The price of cigarettes. I felt a much greater need to quit smoking than to quit drinking. However, there is no way I will quit smoking with alcohol in my system. Story 25. Alcohol damaged my stomach significantly, making it difficult for me to eat. I suffered from gastritis, Barrett's esophagus, hiatal hernia, gastroparesis, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. It has been 4 years since I quit drinking, but my stomach is still in poor condition. Story 26. Watching my dad die of cirrhosis was heartbreaking. He refused to see a doctor until the very end, even though he was severely jaundiced and deteriorating daily. He continued to drink until the day I took him to the emergency room because he could not breathe due to the fluid buildup in his abdomen. They drained the fluid, but the damage was done. He was in active organ failure. I took him home to be on hospice and watched him slowly decline over a few weeks. Addiction is devastating. I lost my mom to prescription pill addiction. Before all of this, I drank every day. It was all I knew. Life is too short, and my son deserves to break unhealthy cycles. Congratulations to everyone who has quit. You are worthy of a healthy life. Story 27. I experienced a severe hangover and was vomiting blood and stomach bile all day. I woke up restrained in a hospital bed after having several seizures. I spent a few days there and decided it was time to quit. I remained sober for almost 2 months, but then I began drinking even more than before. After another severe hangover, I quit cold turkey. Although I didn't have any seizures, I hallucinated for about 3 days. I stayed sober for about a week but couldn't resist drinking again. A few weeks later, I had another severe hangover that lasted 3 days, which led me to decide I was done for good, regardless of the circumstances. I hallucinated for 3 days again, but this time I understood the cause, so I wasn't as frightened. Fortunately, I survived, and now I am over 3.5 years sober. I used to drink 12 to 16-ounce beers every day, and even more on weekends when I went out with friends. Story 28. I'm not sure that I was ever an alcoholic. For me, alcohol was always more of a frequency problem than a volume problem. Over the past few years, I've had long periods of sobriety ranging from 3 to 12 months, but inevitably I would find myself drinking again. So why did I quit? For one, when I'm drinking, I find that the frequency increases gradually, starting with 1 to 2 times a week and developing into an almost daily habit. Additionally, I'm really active in the mountains, and when I fall short of my admittedly ambitious goals, I don't want to wonder if alcohol was the difference. New Year's resolutions work for me, so I'm a little over 3 months sober. I am not going to restart the clock again. I am done. Story 29. I received an undeniable and immediate negative reaction that confirmed it was no longer helpful to me. Story 30. 2 of my best friends struggled with alcohol and substance abuse, and we spent a lot of time together. Unfortunately, both of them are no longer with us due to overdoses. Although alcohol was not the direct cause of death, it led them down the wrong path. Story 31. I was destroying my mental health and couldn't tell the difference between reality and delusion, or truth and lies. My mind was completely twisted. I didn't get arrested or hospitalized, but I could have and should have because of the way I was drinking. I suffered many consequences of my alcoholism, but what made me quit for good, along with the state of my mental health, was considering my not yets. I knew where I would end up if I didn't stop drinking. If I drink, I will die because of it. If I drink, others may die or be injured because of it. I want to keep those things as not yets forever. That's my biggest motivator. Story 32. I was intoxicated every day for about 3 years, spending over $25,000 on alcohol and takeout. Finally, I blacked out and embarrassed myself in front of my partner's mother. I have been sober for 2 years. Unfortunately, she will not speak to me or accept my apologies. It has now turned into resentment, but that's another story. Story 33. When I realized I was using it to cope the same way my uncle did, who died the year before from alcoholism, I recognized that I was drinking at least 2 bottles of wine a night. I'm 2 years sober now. Story 34. I got sober for my ex-wife and kids. I stopped drinking in 2020 and haven't looked back. My last time heavily drinking involved consuming 30 beers and 750 milliliters of liquor in an hour. I blacked out and woke up the next day. After a few conversations, I finally realized that I had a drinking problem. Story 35. I didn't wait to stop drinking to start doing internal work, including therapy and grounding exercises. For me, that is yoga, walking, hiking, and, at the time, going to the gym. I also prepared to face some uncomfortable changes. My dad's health started to decline, and the timing felt right. I went from 10 shots a night to nothing by tapering down for a week using beer. I had my last 2 beers with my friends nearly 500 nights ago. Story 36. I was officially going to be homeless in the upcoming days. No husband, no family, no friends. I had 1 weekend to get right and stay right, or I would be out in the cold literally. Coming from a semi-privileged background, I knew I wouldn't be okay and would likely die soon after. I called around and found myself in a sober living home just a mile from my own. That was 9 years ago, and since then my best friend, who is my husband, and I have managed to rebuild our relationship and love each other deeply through it all. I finished my bachelor's degree, received a master's degree, and now I have a fulfilling career. Most amazingly, I gave birth to the most wonderful boy 5 years ago. Ultimately, it came down to me being so tired. I had periods of sobriety but would always relapse. Each time it got worse and I lost more. The moment that broke me has always seemed overwhelmingly selfish to me. I had years of loved ones pleading for me to stop, but I only did when I was finally tired. Without any options, I felt like I could live through. The permanence of it really relies on me absolutely knowing that my entire life would come crumbling down, and I might possibly end up in jail or a psychiatric ward if I drank today. The sober part of me never seems to want to risk it. Story 37. I ran out of strategies. Every time I went on a binge and came out of it embarrassed and hurt, I always developed some kind of plan to turn my life around, but none of them worked. I tried going to church, finding a job, working out, and meeting different friends. The list goes on. One morning, I realized that I no longer had a plan. I was far more afraid of continuing to live than I was of dying because, quite frankly, my daily existence felt worse than death. I lost faith in myself. However, the moment I lost that faith, I became willing to have faith in something greater than myself. I attended meetings, worked through the steps, and the rest is history. Story 38. My family felt sorry for me. My partner was disgusted with me. My friends were done with me. I have been sober for over 6 years. It was the best decision I ever made. Story 39. Made a $1,500 bet. It has been 2 months, and the bet will be completed in 1 month. I am not planning to drink again. Story 40. Started to affect my body, making me violent and causing irritating thoughts. Wildly enough, it's the most addictive and destructive substance I have ever encountered, and I have tried everything except phencyclidine. I dislike alcohol. Story 41. I love how the best alcohol quitting stories are about people running from law enforcement, losing everything, and being on the verge of throwing it all away for a drink. Meanwhile, the worst marijuana quitting story is often about someone feeling bad, losing friends, and having a dead-end job, leading to their decision to quit using. Now they are 15 years sober with a wife and kids. However, marijuana has cost many people their freedom and has been classified at the same level as heroin. I love the United States. I love being an American. Story 42. I mean, as someone who has struggled with alcoholism and has not consumed alcohol in nearly 10 years, your question is inappropriate and somewhat offensive. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.